September 4th, 2001. This is the How It Works class number 3 on the nature of mind or consciousness. Hi, everybody. It's good to see all of you again. There's a really good silence tonight. Happened very early and very silent. Tonight's topic is the nature of mind, and this class could be called How It Works. The whole series is called How It Works, but this particular class could be called the How It Works of How It Works, so to speak. Again, I want to remind you that I'm not at all interested in your believing what I say. What I want you to do, if you can, is hear what I say and understand it. And then go out in the world or compare it with your experience as I'm talking and see if it's true for you. This is all a matter of experience. Intellectual understanding of this stuff is essentially useless. It may be a step in the right direction, but the experience is what we're interested in. The nature of mind is, as everything else in this class, really inexpressible. This is a topic, I really got my clarity on this 10 or 11 years ago. There's a lady in Atlanta, Georgia, named Meg Johnson. She's an infinite way teacher and a student of Joel Goldsmith's. And I had been listening to Barbara Muhl's students teaching a class on the nature of mind, and I didn't understand. I mean, I heard what they were saying, and it was not ringing true to me. I knew that they didn't understand what they were talking about, that they were parroting Barbara's words. They were telling me what they heard Barbara say rather than having their own understanding of it. And I commented on this to my friend Dulcie, and she told me she had this tape from this lady in Georgia named Meg Johnson, and I should listen to that, and I listened to it. And there it was, just as clear as a bell. This woman just laid it out so clear, and I'm just sitting there saying, clip, 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 just getting the whole thing. So I subsequently went down to Georgia to meet her and attend one of her classes, and thank her. Really, what I wanted to do was thank her for her very clear presentation. And the interesting thing was that she had been teaching that material for 20 years to her students, and she was surprised when I told her that I got it, that I understood what she was saying, because that was not happening, that the students weren't getting it, they were getting parts of it. So this is not easy, because there's nothing you can hold on to. It's not algebra or physics, nothing you can jump into and get a hold of, but you can understand it, and you can get a start tonight and start seeing it in your life. So it'll be an interesting thing, and a lot of people in this room have a lot of understanding of this. Of course, once I understood what Meg said, then I discovered that Joel had been saying it for years, and I just hadn't got it from the way Joel said it, because it was spread out across many books, but it's all in chapter 6 of The Thunder of Silence. He says it's as clear as a bell once I knew it. But it took Meg to give me the clarity on it, and maybe there'll be some clarity here for you tonight. The basic principle from the first night is that all there is God, and God is spiritual, and to us human being type creatures, spiritual looks like consciousness. God is spiritual and God is consciousness are synonymous statements in my mind. So if we go from all there is God to God is consciousness, then we get all there is consciousness. And this is an absolutely fundamental truth of all the major spiritual thought that I've ever encountered. This is the fundamental core of Advaita Vedanta. This is the fundamental core of Buddhism. This is the fundamental core of Lao Tzu, of Taoism. This is what Lao Tzu was trying to say, and Chuang Tzu, and all these people, and the Sufi masters. It's all about consciousness. All there is consciousness, is the fundamental statement. And the Christian church pretty much held still for 1850 or 1880 years after Christ, until Mary Baker Eddy and that whole school of people came along that had some revelations of their own that led to the metaphysical church movements, Christian Science and religious science and unity and New Thought and all those movements. And what they discovered is the nature of mind. What they discovered is that the higher reality than matter is mind. That, and we hear that, we hear about mind over matter. What they realized is that matter is really mind expressed. And here's where it already gets hard to understand, because we're so conditioned to believe in the absolute reality of matter, and to think then that matter is just mind expressed is a hard step to take. But it's the basis of all the metaphysical churches. It's also the basis in our own life of affirmations. We say affirmations expecting it to change our reality, and it does. These metaphysical churches got into psychosomatic medicine and expected a change in your mind to change your physical well-being, and it does. Joel Goldsmith and all the people in Christian Science especially were healers, great healers, phenomenal healers, and healing is a demonstration of the fact that mind is the expression, that matter is the expression of mind. So there are lots of clues for us to see if we're looking for them, if we're just not so conditioned to believing in the absolute reality of matter that we don't even look and listen. And I can't think of a better way for God to give us an insight into this topic than through human dreams. When we dream at night, it's as if, the words are difficult, but it's as if we create a bubble in consciousness, in our mind. It's if our mind creates a bubble. And in that bubble, if you want to think of it that way, is whatever we're dreaming. And it may be a place, it might be a restaurant we're at with some people, and we're having meals, and a variety of things happen. A waiter comes up, there's menus, there's food, there's conversation, there's people, there may be a calamity, who knows what all might happen in your dream. And then you wake up, and where was it? That whole dream, that whole scene that you were in is what I think of as a bubble in consciousness. It's your own bubble. And nobody else had that dream. Nobody else saw that bubble. that bubble wasn't anywhere. That place never did exist. It was just a bubble. That time never happened. That dream might have had a real time within the dream duration of an hour, 2 hours, several hours, days, months, years actually. And if somebody had been checking your brain, they would have seen that the dream lasted a second. So the time was all part of this bubble within your mind. The place was all part of the bubble. The people in that dream. Now, maybe your friends were there, but they weren't your friends. You created those people. They looked like your friends, but they were just your imagination in your bubble. You may have had a really good meal. Food, matter, fulfilling. But you wake up hungry. Darn, it didn't fill you, but it was fulfilling in the dream, and you were in the dream. There you were doing all these things, and yet when you wake up, that you that was in the dream never existed, all part of the bubble. If I'd come into the bubble, if I showed up in your bubble, sort of on the aside, not under the control of your mind, but if I was able to slip into your dream and show up and sit down at your table, I could rap on to ask you if you really thought this table was real, and you would have sworn it was, and I would ask you if the food really tasted good, and was the food real, and you were sure it was, and I said, are you really here, and you were sure you were, and perhaps in the dream you have cancer, and I say, don't worry about it, it's not going to kill you, it's just a dream, and you would think I was crazy. All this is going on in your bubble. Okay? So, here we have time and space created, we have scenes created, we have people created, we have scenarios created, we have materiality created, all of this stuff created. And there's no possible source of that creation except your own brain, your own mind. So we see that we do it all the time. So I'm going to suggest, first of all, that the mind I'm talking about is the big mind, not this little mind bubble that you create every time you dream, but I'm talking about a really big mind bubble in consciousness. And if you like to, it's perfectly okay to think of it as God's bubble. This is God's bubble. What we call reality is really God's bubble. All there is God. God is consciousness. All there is consciousness. So, of course, God's creation is going to be a creation within consciousness, just as your creation when you dreamed was within your consciousness. Here's the creation within God's consciousness. And it's God's bubble. So, that's where we'll start. That's the first food for thought tonight. Margaret told me that when she was trying to get an understanding of mind, that she prayed about it quite a lot and asked God, what is mind? What is mind? Tell me, what is this mind? She, like I, had read Joel talking about mind, probably read The Thunder of Silence as many times as I had or more, and she'd heard Joel talk about it. She wondered, what is mind? And so she kept praying to God, what is mind? What is mind? What is mind? And she finally heard the voice say to her, you're looking at it. This. Space. We're all looking at mind. And that was the start of her unfoldment. And that was the statement that started her revelation that resulted in her having the teaching that cleared it up for me. Of course, just as an aside, subsequently I spent the 7 years with Robert, who just laughed at all of that and said, there's no mind. So that's another topic. Mind is what you're looking at. And mind is created by God in His image, as we are created by God in His image. And some of the properties, well, one interesting thing about mind is that we, as human beings, are within it. And we, as human beings, are creative, as I just pointed out to you, with respect to the creation of your own dreams. We are creative, and our creativity when we're asleep is limited to our dreams, pretty much. But when we're awake, we're also creative. And it is that creativity in us, in mind, the big bubble, that is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about mind over matter. It is in that sense that we as human beings are creative, and we can, through affirmations, cause to materialize those things that we're affirming day in and day out. You know, the belief that, you know, if you affirm that money will come to you, and it may well, if you affirm something enough, it may well materialize, unless there's something else going on within you that prevents it from affirming. This is the sense in which we're talking about mind materializing as matter. It's not seeing is believing, it's believing is seeing. It's what you really believe that is expressed in mind. Let me see which way I want to go here now. All right, let's start from the top. I always have to find out whether to start from the top or start from the bottom. And I always do a little from the top and a little from the bottom, you know. And when God created its bubble, it created it perfectly, because God's nature is perfection and clarity and love. So God's creation is perfection. And God created what we call human beings as perfection, created in its image. You may recall we said at the last class that God created man as individual, impersonal consciousness. So man is really an expression, from God's viewpoint, of consciousness, of each man is another example of an individual, personalized consciousness of God, given the attributes that God gives that creation that He calls man. He has another set of creations that it calls cat, and that creation has those attributes, that amount of intelligence, that amount of whatever it is that God is allocating to that creature called cat. And God's creation is perfect and eternal and unchanging and error-free. The kicker is, good way to say it, the kicker is that He created man, and man forgot that it's impersonalized individual consciousness of God, and believed what's in the bubble. The human problem is that we believe what's in the bubble as reality instead of God's completely spiritual creation as reality. And so here we are in the bubble, and we're believing we're in the bubble, and we're creative, and so we're recreating the bubble as we see it. Is that being heard? Do you see that God has this perfect bubble, but then we're inside the bubble, and we're looking at what's inside the bubble, and we're seeing what we see, but we're also creative, and so we're coming through with our affirmations, which may or may not be consistent with what God created, but our affirmations are working because we're creative, and so we as people are materializing inside the human bubble what we see. And that's the problem. And, of course, therein also lies the solution. Joel talks a lot about the nature of God's creation. There are a lot of things we can see about God's creation. You can see God's law in action. There are a lot of laws that are expressed to us as physical laws that are true. I mean, about the way planets work and the way they rotate around suns, and about the way galaxies work and how the universe works and how ordered all that is. You can see the sense of order, and you can see the sense of order in smaller things. Joel always likes to point out that the apples always grow on apple trees. You never see an orange on an apple tree. You never see an apple on a pear tree. People always produce peoples. Goats always produce goats. There is a law. There is an underlying law that reflects God's plan, reflects what God created. But then there's us and our ability to meddle. And by thinking, just by thinking, innocently meddling, because we think all this is real. And we don't know God's got anything to do with it, although we attribute all sorts of weird stuff to God in it. But God's not in the bubble. God doesn't even see what's going on in the bubble. God did God's creation. God's done with all that. The creation is perfect. The creation is available. And we're inside the bubble, mucking with it. Sort of an interesting situation. Now, the thing to think about it in the sense of how it works is that there are 8 billion of us, roughly, inside the bubble, thinking at it. Okay? And these 8 billion all have very different concepts of God or no concept of God, and some of their concepts of God are right and some of their concepts of God are wrong, and they have very different understandings about how things work, and some of the concepts are right and some of their concepts are wrong. And so a lot of what we see inside the bubble is the combined opinion of the 8 billion. Let's bring in a couple of other words. Let's talk about human consciousness as distinct from absolute consciousness. By human consciousness, I mean, or Joel calls it world mind. It's the same thing. By human consciousness, what I mean is the consciousness of all the human beings. Okay? The collective consciousness. And I'm not talking about, subconscious mythology, although that's a whole different topic that's fun to get into from this viewpoint. But I'm just talking about the collection of human beliefs. Let's talk about just human beliefs, the collection of human beliefs. And what we are seeing in the bubble is the result of the collection of human beliefs. And human beings don't, as a rule, are conditioned as a rule to believe in matter. So we believe in matter rather than having this spiritual consciousness that we're talking about now, sort of by default. When you're born into human consciousness, and you're immediately deluged by this. There's really only one consciousness, and we're all in it. We're all partaking of that one consciousness. So when we're born into a human body, we're immediately deluged by the conditioned beliefs of the 8 billion. And these conditioned beliefs are self-sustaining. I like to think of it as if each of us had a broadcaster and a receiver on top of our head. And so we're receiving what everybody else is broadcasting, and we're broadcasting what we're receiving, what they believe, and we're broadcasting what we believe. And of course, most of what we believe is what they believe, so we're receiving their beliefs and rebroadcasting them, and that's what's going to them, which they're receiving, and so they're rebroadcasting it. So there's 8 billion people essentially telling each other they're right and believing it. So human consciousness is very self-sustaining. It is changeable, it is liftable, it is lifting. Human consciousness over the centuries is becoming higher. We are starting to introduce concepts, humanitarian concepts, and we're now starting to concern ourselves with stopping wars and things like that. The reaction to human consciousness becoming higher is, of course, that the other side of human consciousness becomes more virulent. But the point is that there is one human consciousness, and it is continually broadcasting its beliefs. Think of it as a radio station. Call letters are KFUC, and that's what we're immersed in, and that's what is creating what we're seeing. We are all different, and we are, of different ages and of different sexes, and we live in different cities and in different states and in different countries, and according to who we are, that sort of fine-tunes what it is we'll pick up. Well, I just thought there's a very interesting experiment that it was run several years ago concerning the only one consciousness. On an island somewhere in the Pacific where there were monkeys, they trained some monkeys to wash their food before they ate it. And then they traveled by boat 50 miles to another island and went over there and discovered the monkeys washing their food. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, okay? Just for a little hard reality about that, so to speak. Okay, what happens is that of the incredible broadcast of the 8 billion, our receiver fine-tunes to pick up the stuff that's pertinent to us. It seems like this is all a way of thinking about this. Okay, this is not truth about this, but this is a very convenient way for me to think about it, and a lot of the people that work with me. We tend to pick up that which is consistent with us. The beliefs of the inherent beliefs of men are different than women. The inherent beliefs of people born in the United States are different from those born in France or Israel or Arabia. The inherent beliefs of Californians, the California consciousness is quite different from the Minnesota consciousness. The Southern California consciousness is quite different from Northern California consciousness. Hermosa Beach consciousness is quite different from Manhattan Beach consciousness. 30-year-old consciousness is quite different from 40-year-old consciousness. And so what we discover is that we tend to pick up that consciousness which is consistent with us. So the 30-year-old girls are interested in all the 30-year-old female stuff, and the 50-year-old men are interested in the 50-year-old men stuff, and things like this. Just occurred to me, advertising certainly is aware that there's only one consciousness and it works this way. That's what television commercials are all about. That's why commercials work. Notice that commercials make absolutely no attempt at all to be reasonable. They just want to be in your consciousness a lot of times, just to make it become part of you, and then that will happen. Joel talks about subliminal perception. They ran some experiments where people went to a movie, and the way a subliminal is it's something that is input upon you that you're not consciously aware of. What they did was, movies are really like 32 frames per second to give you the illusion of movement. And what they did was they shoved in a picture of a Coca-Cola and a bag of popcorn for 1 frame out of the 32, okay? And ran the movie. And you don't ever see that. You don't the 132. Your eyes are holding still, and they're not seeing each individual frame because your eyes react slowly. That's what gives you the illusion of one picture moving rather than 32 pictures going by. And sliding you a picture of a Coca-Cola and a bag of popcorn every 31 shots doesn't impinge on your consciousness directly. You're not aware of it. And yet the Coca-Cola and popcorn sales went up by 300% in that theater at that movie because it was being received. So this is what's going on with us and human consciousness. It's all subliminal. I mean, you can read it in the newspaper, you can read what's going on, but you don't have to. It's impinging on us. And the only way out of that is to be aware of it. If you're aware of what's going on and you're aware of spiritual truth, you don't have to believe what's being impinged on you. We look at lots of commercials and just laugh at them because they're just so ridiculous. And all that means is that they're not aimed at us. Whoever they're aimed at is just buying them hook, line, and sinker because they've been very carefully bred for those people. But, there are some we laugh at, but there are some we buy that other people are laughing at. But if you're aware of what's going on, if you're aware that the only purpose is to sell you stuff, then you suddenly see what's going on and it becomes very clear. See if I need to say anything else about that. I think you have the picture now of what this consciousness looks like and what's really going on with us. Let me see if I had any more notes about that. So that's the nature of mind. Now there are other components to the mind. We also have an intellect, and I use the word intellect to refer to the rational part of our. We use the word mind usually to include all sorts of things, and I'm specifically using the word mind here, and I will from now on in this class use mind to refer to the bubble. Okay? Now within the bubble, within ourselves, we have an intellect. We have the ability to think rationally. We also have a database, memories, a place to store memories, and actually that database goes back across many lifetimes. There's a lot of stuff in that data bank that we're not aware of consciously, but it's there. It's driving us, actually, conditioning us. And there is, we have something called intuition, which is a very important feature, which is something that is part of our individual impersonal consciousness and is not part of mind. We each have a faculty in us which we can call intuition.
And it's separate from the mind. It's more of a
It's
sensory or a
it's
truth.
not it's not rational.
It's not rational.
It's intuitive. It's not rational. And let me
It's not
talk.
really part of the bubble then, is it?
It's not part of the bubble, but it's within the bubble. All of this is within the bubble.
Okay.
It's within the us that's within the bubble. But let me draw you a picture in your mind. Joel talks about God is a funnel, and I'm the spout, he says. And if you can picture an infinitely wide funnel, and what's above the funnel, the infinity of what's above the funnel is God, and there's this little spout that comes down, a spout each, by the way. Everybody gets their own spout. A spout each. And at the end of the spout, I like to think of it, I sort of think like we're stuck, the spout comes right to the top of our head, and we're sort of glued to the spout. And our brain is like a filter there that is preventing pure God above the spout from coming into our consciousness, okay? And this is what I'm talking about. This is our conditioning. Our conditioning is what's preventing us from seeing what's up the spout. Now, inside the bubble, pointing to inside the bubble that the spout is pointing to is our body and our brain, our intellect, our intuition, our data banks. All these things are individual things, and they're all within the bubble. This whole thing is within the bubble. Outside of the bubble is this perfect impersonalized piece of individualized God consciousness, which doesn't have any of these problems at all. It doesn't have minds. It doesn't have intellects. It doesn't have any of this stuff, and it doesn't need intuition because it is the intuitive being. So we have this conditioning. Some of us do, some of us don't. I'm sorry. He's not conditioned at all. And I sort of think of it like the conditioning is like, think of it as like molasses in your brain, okay? And we can use our intellect to read truth or read other stuff. I mean, whatever you read, whatever you believe is what's going to manifest. But we can use our intellect to read truth and to listen to truth, the tapes, read the books, do that kind of thing. And it's sort of like it thins the molasses, okay? The molasses gets thinner. And when the molasses is thin enough, then intuition can begin to function. And intuition is the short circuit connection to God. The funnel is sort of like the intuition, is like sort of like our intuitive sense of God, okay? And God is infinite, but the amount of God that's in our life, our own personal life, our own personal experience, is determined by the diameter of our particular spout. If your spout is closed, there's no God in your life. If your spout is absolutely jammed shut, there's no God in your life at all. You're just totally at the mercy of human consciousness. You're in there with the 8 billion, and you're getting what they believe. Now, as you develop some understanding of truth, even intellectually, by doing what Joel called studying the letter of truth, and as you develop a meditation practice, which is also a molasses thinner, you begin to develop some intuition. And what this really boils down to is clearing the spout and expanding the spout. So as we go through our spiritual practices, as we continue in our sadhana, our spiritual practices, what we're really doing is working on increasing the diameter of the spout. And if you think of yourself as, you're either looking out in the bubble or you're looking up the spout. And, as the spout gets bigger, you're seeing more God. There's more God in your life. That's the role of intuition. A fully realized person has an infinitely wide spout. There is no spout. The whole idea of spout is gone. A fully realized person just knows that person is one with God. That is that one individualized consciousness within the total consciousness, that it's just part of the one. Now the interesting thing, or an interesting thing, is that as we clear the spout, as we expand our intuition, as we let more, intuition is the way that God's truth comes in. Intuition and revelation are very closely akin. Meditation and intuition is the means by which we learn truth and click truth and grab onto truth and understand and get it really. We get the clicks and everything. That's all intuitive. Click, the things that we really get are intuitive, and that's because we've been working on getting this intuitive pipe to God going. We've been working on our intuition, or our awareness of God. As we expand that, then we realize more of God's creation. Okay? And we're no longer... And the reality is that what's real is God's creation. What's going on inside of the bubble is what we think about God's creation. The reality is God's creation. The real you is this perfect spiritual being. The real creation is this perfect spiritual creation. The problem is that down inside of this bubble we're playing with human consciousness, and we're seeing good and evil and tall and short and all the things we see, all the dualities that we see, disease and health. All that stuff is just the manifestation of human consciousness as distinct from God's creation. So as we work on increasing our understanding, as we work on expanding our intuition and our God awareness through meditation, what happens is there is more understanding of truth in us. And what we manifest in mind is what we understand. So our experience inside the bubble starts looking more godlike rather than human-like. It clears up. I say lots of times, and I'm sure I've said it here once or twice before, the basic principle of all the metaphysical churches, especially the Infinite Way, but all the metaphysical churches and even the higher understandings, is that my experience is the immediate outpicturing of the content of my own consciousness, my own personal consciousness. What I'm seeing is what I believe. If I don't choose specifically what I believe, then what I believe is what the 8 billion believe. And so what I'm seeing in the areas that I don't choose specifically what I'm going to believe, or that I don't examine what I'm going to believe, is I'm going to see what the 8 billion believe, although I'll see what the 40 or the 60-year-old Hermosa Beach male of the 8 billion believe. But I will get the human consciousness, and I will start worrying about my financial situation, and I'll start worrying about this, and I'll start worrying about that, and I'll start worrying about all the things that those people worry about, If I was 40, I'd have to worry about the 40-year-old stuff, like, I don't have enough in my retirement fund, or whatever the hell it is that you're supposed to worry about when you're 40 is distinct from when you're 60. To the extent that you're not taking charge of the content of your consciousness, the default is the 8 billion, because 8 billion to 1 is tough odds. But 1 plus God is infinite, because God is. So as you change the content of your consciousness to contain more of God's reality, your outpicturing will be more godlike. Joel talks about being a gatekeeper at the portals to our mind. And I was talking with somebody today about that, actually. When the thought first comes, when you first hear the thought, you don't let the thought get into your brain. When you hear it right here in your ear, she doesn't love me enough. And when you hear a thought right here, you stop it right there. You don't let it get into your brain. When you hear there's not enough, you stop it right there. When you hear there's flu going around, you stop it right there. When you hear it's time to get breast cancer or prostate cancer, depending on your gender or stuff like that, you notice that it's really a very selective thing. Men very seldom get breast cancer, and women very seldom get prostate cancer. We do pick up very, very strongly on our own gender human belief, but both of those are human beliefs, and neither one has to take place. We'll get into this, of course, in the healing discussion. Charge, we need, first of all, to become aware of what we're thinking, which is a very good reason for practicing meditation. There is no quicker way to become aware of how your mind does run on than to try to sit quietly, because it will immediately start running on at great length. So, if nothing else, meditation will allow you to see that your mind is this independently operating facility that has nothing to do with you. And what it's running on about is what it's doing is reciting for you that subset of what the 8 billion believe that's appropriate for you today. And we need to learn to hear that and instead replace it with the truth we've learned about the nature of God, and which we've learned also by our practice of meditation, and also by reading truth, and also through expanding our intuition until we can have our own little clicks or big clicks as we do see the truth of these things that I'm talking about, for example. And my experience is exactly the outpicturing of the content of my consciousness, of my own personal beliefs. Every time I change any belief, regardless of how infinitesimal the change is, the picture must change, because that's this space, it's an effect. Just like the bubble in your dream is all effect. There's no source in the dream. The dream is all effect. There are things going on in the dream, and you may in your dream think that this causes this, and this causes this, and this causes this, but none of that's true. That's all being caused by your mind, who's creating the dream. So similarly in this, everything out there is effect, and what I believe is the cause for my experience within the bubble. And if you believe different, you'll have a different experience, even if we're standing side by side. And we all know that. We all know that two of us can sit together and talk about a third person and not have seen the same thing. I think she's wonderful, you think she's a bitch, or vice versa. we hear the same statement, and I take it one way and you take it the other way because of how we're conditioned, or because of our own scripts, or our own beliefs, or our own kid, or our own unfinished work, or our own beliefs, the fact is that it's all just what we believe. It may not even be happening out there. It's all an effect of our belief. And which brings to mind the point that so you don't go out there trying to fix things. You go in here to try to fix them. You change your belief and the picture changes. Trying to change things out there is like looking at yourself in the mirror in the morning and deciding you look like hell and putting lipstick on the mirror. Or brushing the mirror's hair, or shaving the mirror, okay? Trying to fix things out there is exactly the same as trying to fix the image in the mirror. You go here to do the repair work. And what I hope you're seeing tonight is that, if you're willing to, let's say for the moment that you're willing to assume that God's creation is perfect, blissful, harmonious, eternal, and man's creation is what we experience, I hope you realize that you don't need to work on man's creation, nor do you have to work on the little you that's in the bubble, trying to make that little you perfect. What you need to do is increase your intuition so that there's more of God's perfection in the consciousness, and then the picture changes. That will change the picture. You don't need to work on the picture. All you need to do is work on your understanding of God. There is exactly as much God in your world as you are aware of God. No more, no less. God is not withholding. The apparent withholding is being done because of your lack of awareness of the presence of God. You don't get more out of God by asking God for more. You get more out of God by becoming more aware of God. Being more aware of the presence of God. The work is all about practicing the presence of God and about watching your mind and hearing it as it picks up what human consciousness is telling you. I have recommended to many of the people I sponsor that they quit reading the newspaper and watching the news on television. And their days just improve tremendously. It's just amazing how much better your day goes if you don't start the day out believing all that stuff. Dropping the television, drop the radio, just the news. You can watch all the rest of the stuff. Don't watch sitcoms, so that's even worse than news. But, cutting out there's an explicit and overt broadcaster of human consciousness rather than a covert one, rather than the omnipresent covert subliminal one. But, let's see if I need to say anything else or not. I don't think so. Let's open it up for questions, answers, comments, talk, discussion, ridicule, laughter. Yeah.
I have a question. I'm sure you've heard of Louise Hayes.
I know the name, but I don't know in the context.
Let's see, how can I explain it? She has a book. God, what is it called? Oh, anyway, she's a really big believer in affirmations.
Mm-hmm.
So as you were talking, it made me think about this, because you can literally open her book and it'll say if you have a backache, this is potentially what you're thinking. and this is the affirmation you can give yourself in order to change that. And so she's a really big believer in affirmations heal. So I was sitting here thinking, so if I'm hearing you correctly, I could, for example, because I've been trying to do this more, like, I remember you saying something about, like, to really, like, I could power up really good in the morning, right, with spirituality and my readings and everything, and that sometimes will sort of take you throughout the day. And so I've been trying to do that more, and so I've been going, and you said go directly to the source, don't go to somebody who's saying what somebody said. And so she's got these little affirmation cards that I bought at this store, and they're really great. I like close my eyes and I pick one every morning, and they'll say like, my life is absolutely perfect. And then on the other side it'll say something like, you know, life is totally perfect, and I'm in it, living it, or something like that, you know. So what you're saying is like, you could take something like that and basically use that on a daily basis to sort of lift yourself up, and in a way, it's up to you if you choose to believe it or not, right?
Right. But let me say that's a good first step. But the problem with affirmations is that is, and it's definitely a much better step than material beliefs, okay? But the problem with affirmations is that is you are using your mind to try to change the picture. And the only thing it takes to prevent that from working is a stronger mind than yours.
Okay.
So if you're trying to manifest something positive and somebody else is trying to manifest the opposite of that, he wins.
But how's that? Because if you said if it's under default, for sure the 8 million would win over me. But if I'm coming up with my own belief,
well, you have, so to speak, you have more effect on your own personal world than the 8 billion. I mean, you know, it's like gravity is stronger, closer to the source. So you do have more effect on your own personal world. But the point is that if you're using your mind to accomplish something, then other minds
they could still win over
can defeat it or take it away.
So what do you
Whereas if you meditate and see God's picture, see God's reality, then that will manifest in your life, which will be harmony and joy and bliss and love and perfection. And God certainly can outpower the 8 billion. So I'm saying that yes, affirmations are a good first step, and it certainly is a demonstration that mind over matter works. Let me give you voodoo is mind over matter. Okay? Voodoo is accomplished by a fairly high spiritually medicine man who believes firmly that what he believes will manifest, and therefore it does. And he's got a very strong consciousness, and it manifests. And he can do that for good or for evil. And if you have two voodooists, one doing for good and one for evil, then the stronger wins. Okay? That's the problem. And there's always been good kahunas and bad kahunas in Ireland, and I mean in Hawaii, and you know there's black magic and there's white magic, and there's good witches and bad witches, and all of that is still in duality. And the fact is that, you know, instead of fighting that, why not go for God's perfection? Why not even experience any of that duality?
And so that's basically through meditating and being quiet, and I will hear that?
You will.
Automatically.
You will, if you have it, yes, automatically. Your understanding of God will grow, and the picture will change.
Without anything.
Without your doing
there.
Anything at all about the picture. Absolutely.
Because when I sit quiet in the morning, I have a million thoughts that I got to get rid of first before I can hear anything.
Fine.
So just
let them run.
Write it out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Let them run. Yeah.
No, I was just going to kind of say the same thing. I was thinking of placebos, you know, when people are sick and they're taking medication, and that sometimes the doctor will prescribe a placebo and they don't know about it, but it's still a tangible thing, and we're so used to using the tangible for an intangible result. Meditation is.
I use very practical. I mean, I use this mind over matter, this awareness of conscious, very practically. I never see doctors. I refuse to go to a doctor because doctors are looking to find something wrong, and if you look for something wrong, you'll find it. You know, so I don't go to doctors. I haven't been to a doctor 10 times since I got out of my parents' house when I was 20. You know, I just don't go to doctors, and I'm perfectly healthy because I'm not in doctor's consciousness. You know. There's an example, and that's working in mind. The other thing, of course, is that I do work on my God consciousness, and I do expect to see perfection, and I'm sure that's the reason I can be healthy not seeing doctors, because I don't believe in all that stuff. But I'm very careful not to hang out with doctors because they'll want to run an x-ray or a CAT scan or something. You know, they'll go looking for stuff, you know, and if you look for something, you'll find it. There's no question about that. So anyway, I would say that affirmations are definitely a good step, and get in the habit of thinking positively, but that's just a step, and you don't want to. The idea is not to strengthen your mind and take charge of that out there by strengthening your mind. The idea is to become a clear channel, an open spout on the funnel for God to flow through you and manifest whatever the heck it is that God has in mind for you to do from the gate. Okay? And that will be joyful. Doing it yourself may be happy sometimes, but of course there's always the opposite. You know, it's happy and then it's sad because it disappears, or because you forget to do it one day and it goes away, or whatever, you know. But yeah, when God is flowing through you, that's joyful. That's joy.
And that's separate from reading and affirmations and the whole nine yards.
From a regular daily spiritual practice, and it grows, and it grows. You don't have to get done before it happens. It happens day by day. The picture changes.
I'm frustrated because I don't understand one thing that's going to sound like a challenge, and I don't mean it that way. But if we're part of God's consciousness and it's perfect, why isn't what we see in our bubble an extension of that perfection? And why would it even be important one way or the other?
Well, the question is,
the
question, yeah, the reason we see in the bubble what we see is because that's what we believe. The question is, why did God let us forget that we're God? And nobody's ever given me an answer to that. Joel doesn't answer that. Nobody answers that. Because it wouldn't be any fun.
So my answer just has to be larger. Is that what I mean?
When you gave us the message of the prodigal son, wasn't that kind of an explanation? We broke away to find our own truth.
So why did he let us do that? We had the truth to begin with. Why would we break away? I mean, that the son was already ignorant. Why did that happen? You know. Why did Adam and Eve happen? You know, Adam and Eve says because we ate of the fruit of knowledge of good and evil, right? And there it started. You know, I mean, these are all myths. So I got no answer for that, but that is the human condition. The human condition is that we're dual, and there's a spiritual part of us and this apparently physical part of us and while we're believing we're human beings, we're in the bubble, and we're seeing what we believe. See, the mind really is a great spiritual tool. What the mind does is it reflects your current beliefs and forces you to correct them. Because it's just too painful to go on believing what we believe. So the mind is the tool whereby we get to see. The mind is a mirror. The mind is our mirror, which allows us to see who we are today.
Just curious about children and being, or infants and then toddlers and whatever, and their consciousness of the 8 billion, and you have anything to add on that? Is their consciousness of being the same as a 5-year-old as it is as a 30-year-old?
No.
Because 5-year-olds, I mean, you can see some kids are clearly afraid, a lot more afraid than others, and are they bringing in past lives?
They're bringing stuff in. People, I mean, the fact is that we bring in with us a lot of our conditioning from previous lives and a lot of our unfinished work, and we all come in at different points along the spiritual path. Some of us have done more spiritual practice than others in previous lives, and so we're more advanced, so to speak. All sorts of things are different. And also, I mean, a 25-year-old and a 30-year-old get different takes on the human consciousness, and different 25-year-olds get different takes. So it's an individual thing, but I mean, we're talking about the tendency. And kids come in, when they're very young, and first of all, mostly what they've got is mother's consciousness. Yeah, young kids are in their mother's consciousness because they're not exposed to, the huge source of our conditioning is if you would just learn not to speak or understand or read or watch television or go to church and listen to preachers or go to school and listen to teachers. I mean, that's the source of our conditioning, churches and schools and newspapers and television sets and all that, and books and all that stuff is the primary source of our conditioning, so little kids don't have nearly as much of that. It takes a while to condition them.
What is, you talked about as far as the mind, like emotion and intellect. I mean, you talked about intuition and intellect and the mind. How does emotion play into it as far as our conditioning? 'Cause I know in some other cultures, they may celebrate death instead of grieve it. And what's the source of that? I mean, is it just conditioning? Because I can see it as just as easily being conditioned that when somebody dies, instead of grieving, to if our society, culture, said it was happy, then we'd be happy. And
Sure.
Is it as simple as that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. All conditioned. All of the social idea of right and wrong is conditioned. It's impolite here to belch at the dinner table. It's impolite in Japan not to belch at the dinner table. It's all conditioned. It's just all habits of the people around you. It's all conditioned. There's no reason for us to be sad at wakes. We could be joyful at wakes. The difference between an Irish wake and an Irish wedding? One less drunk.
So as a result of becoming aware of conditioning, becoming aware of the way our beliefs create our experience, we start noticing that we react differently.
Start noticing we react what?
We react differently.
Mm-hmm.
That's been like the biggest change for me. Like 3 years ago when my grandma died, I was like that. And like, no, I didn't feel any loss at all. And even when I hear about things like that today,
as your understanding changes, of course, your reactions to things change. I think I should say something about protective work. Joel talks about protective work. Protective work is the practice of getting up in the morning. Essentially what it boils down to is getting up in the morning and reminding yourself of truth. So specifically, bringing truth into your consciousness in the morning to counteract, to fill up the space, essentially to fill the vacuum so that the subliminal input from the 8 billion won't work. Plus the 8 billion were out there thinking all night while you were sleeping. At least 4 billion of them were. 5 or 6 billion of them were thinking, were broadcasting. So Joel talks about protective work, and we can do a whole class on protective work sometime, but the point is simply that what you do is begin your day with knowing some truth. Begin your day with knowing some truth. You'll find lots of things going on inside of you when you start paying attention that have no reason. I mean, like you wake up sad. The world's sad. You can wake up sad, and then you can read something in the paper that explains why everybody can be sad. Or, you wake up sick, and you read in the paper that there's flu going around. You didn't know about it before then. It's all coming in subliminally. You can wake up angry just because you were exposed to a lot of anger. We all know that we walk into, we don't like to hang out with depressed people because it's depressing, right? I mean, it depresses you. Pulls you right down unless you're very clear. So we don't like to hang out with depressed people. That's because there's only one consciousness. That's also why, if those of you who are doing the work around here, we say that when you're in it, you call somebody who's not in it because they can lift you. And you can be lifted by consciousness just as easily as you can be sucked into depression. You go around, hang around happy people, you get happy. The reason AA works, now I'll really tell you how it works. The reason AA works, unlike all the stuff that was tried for the preceding 3 or 4,000 years, is, if you're going to meetings on a regular basis, is that there is a consciousness at the meeting that we don't need to drink today. And if you immerse yourself in the consciousness that it's quite possible to not drink today, then you get that. You really do get AA by osmosis. It's real good to do the steps and clean up the stuff so that you can get clear enough to meditate. The reason you do the 9 steps is so that you can get quiet enough that you can do steps 10, 11, and 12. But the reason AA works is because there's a consciousness there that says, I don't need to drink today. And the reason people get drunk who stop going to meetings is because they stop putting themselves in that consciousness. And pretty soon they no longer have been reinforced that they don't need to drink today. And sure enough, something comes along that requires drinking. It's that simple. That's also why we try to keep AA fairly pure. Because the consciousness that I don't need to shoot heroin today won't help me a bit. Because I'm not a heroin shooter, okay? It's specific truths for specific beliefs. This is not generalities. This is specific truths. 2 plus 2 equals 4 is the specific truth that corrects 2 plus 2 equals 3. It doesn't say anything about 5 plus 5 equals 9. 2 plus 2 equals 4 does not fix 5 plus 5 equals 9. It fixes 2 plus 2 equals 3 and 2 plus 2 equals 5, okay? So we need to be in specific consciousnesses. We get what there, but there's a demonstration that we're all very familiar with, that there's only one consciousness. Walk up to an angry person, if an angry person comes at you, do you feel your anger come up? You walk into a room that's got a little saint in there and you just start feeling so blissful, And we're like yo-yos. We get yanked around by the consciousness around us.
Robert has an example on one of the tapes of the effect of that world consciousness. He said that when he was a kid, he used to like going out in the snow and playing in the snow, and he got his t-shirt on and he would just have the greatest fun as a kid playing in the snow, and did it for a long time. And then he said one time his mother saw him do it, and she said, "Get back in. You can't be out there or you'll catch a cold." And the next day he had a cold. But it had never been suggested to him before then, and he was fine.
Sure. People used to catch colds for years for having wet feet and sitting in a draft. That did cause colds. because people believed it did, not because it. I mean, virus causes colds, but the fact is people believe that wet feet and drafts cause cold, and they got it from wet feet and drafts. You know, it did cause colds. You know, virus doesn't cause colds any more than wet feet and the draft causes colds. Belief in colds causes colds. Now we believe it's viral, and so there's a virus causing colds. Let's be quiet for 2 minutes then. That's plenty, I'm told. Okay, thank you for coming. I love you all.